Hello, everybody. I've just been sat here trying to test out these new Preview 4 OEM bikes, and I've been on them for about 20 minutes now, just across various of the GP tracks, for example. I feel like it's a good way of putting them through a stress test. You know, there's various sizing of ruts across various tracks. They've got some turning rough and different sand or different soil types with sand and soft soil, etc. And I don't know how I feel about them. I was actually really shocked when I first saw that they was making a Preview 4, because obviously I'm just one man's opinions. Please don't be a sheep. Please do test these out for yourself and see how you feel about them. But when they made the Preview 3s, and I spent like an hour on them and I'd got used to them, and I was like, yeah, I think this is it. I can see this being what we get and this change being applied to all the bikes and the full pack being shipped after that. So then when saw in a Preview 4, I was like, damn, what else could they possibly be changing? And it looks like they've changed a few things to more so make the transition between lean angles, so between being cranked over and then upright, a bit more smooth and consistent, because there was situations on the Preview 3s where you could go from like leaning over and sliding a bit to then transitioning a couple of degrees more upright to then getting too much traction and almost flipping off the back of the bike. But it was controllable. And now riding around on these, I almost feel a little bit of a disconnect to the bike, which is a really weird thing to try and get across. And it's a similar issue that I feel like I had on MX vs ATV Legends on the few times I played that. Whereas I never feel like I'm on the bike. I feel like the bike's kind of doing its own thing and then I'm just there for the ride. And they've added, I don't know how, or the intricacies of it, I don't know how it works. They've added it to where the tyre can kind of like move on the rim based on what forces are being applied to the bike, which, you know, is understandable. If you put in a lot of weight and a lot of force through the tyre, I imagine it will shift slightly about on the rim. It won't just stay solid, locked in, dead centre in the middle all the time. There'll be a little bit of give here and there. I don't know if that's the reason for it, but I found that the bike doesn't seem to respond to my rider's movements as much as it used to, at least in terms of corners and over braking bumps, etc. So it's like if I'm going around a bumpy corner and my rider's like hanging off the left or hanging off the right hand side of the bike, it's almost like, so if I'm leaning this way, but let me lean with the bike in game, if I'm leaning this direction and the bike's over to the right, the bike kind of just stays there to the right and it doesn't feel like it responds to what I'm doing quite as much. It's such a hard thing for me to word and try and get across. And I was trying to see if it was just like a one-off fluke or if that's how it is now, and it seems to be a repeatable action. It's just so much different. Like, I imagine that any bikes that we'll get will feel different regardless, and it's a case of getting used to it. But this just feels a little bit odd to me. In terms of the actual traction itself, it said that it should improve traction, the changes that they've made, a bit more. And I feel like it's done the opposite slightly, I'll be honest. In ruts, as always, ruts are usually fine. You know, the bike's fine once it's cranked over. It's more on like the flat tracks. You see like little bits like there, the bike just went loose halfway around the corner and started sliding out from underneath me. And I loaded up Argentina here mostly to test out a couple of these flattish corners. And you can just see how loose the back end is. Now, I'm well aware I am a C-tier rider at best in real life. However, on my last video that I released, GoPro video, the track was an incredibly like dusty, hard-packed and like flinty, stony day, and I was riding the Varg, which has had 52 brake horsepower, so it's basically the equivalent of a 450, and you would argue that the torque/acceleration on the Varg is probably more aggressive than the 450s are, so it should increase its chances of wheel spinning a bit more. And I had, there was like a jump there, which was a step up that was slightly turning at the same time, but really, really polished hard pack, so be really, really slippery. And you could be pretty damn aggressive on the throttle still up the face of that jump without the back end really sliding out much at all. And it still feels like the flatter/off-cambery parts of the game are a struggle on these bikes at the moment. And it's really hard to show off. But again, the main culprit is stuff like the jump after the finish line at Loretta Lynn's, where you're kind of turning left and jumping at the same time, as well as the rollers on Maryland as well. They feel a little bit awkward too. And I don't know why. It purely could be placebo, and through a comparison of 20 minutes compared to a couple of hours on preview 3s, but for whatever reason these bikes do feel slipperier, and I don't think they're meant to. And coming from me, who I do like bikes being quite slippery, to be fair, it almost feels like this is slippery in a less controllable way, which I think is the opposite effect of what they're going for. It sounds like they're trying to make it so, yes, it's going to be slippery, yes, the back end will lose grip, which of course it should do, but it's meant to be in a more controllable sense this time around. But I definitely felt more control in the preview 3s. I mean, when I was doing all of my testing on my Moto 101 track, before all of the ruts and bumps came in and it was purely flat tracking, I could go into corners on that track on the preview 3s, step the back end out under braking, keep it stepped out, then get on the power and accelerate and keep the back end stepped out, and almost like Tokyo drift around the corner, but still steering with the back end. It felt really, really nice, where this feels a little bit more... aggressive might be the right word? A little bit more unpredictable, to where it'll suddenly go at a certain point and it's, oh god, I can't really fight that and bring that back. In terms of positives, I am a fan of the front end. I think that's been a staple across all of the preview bikes so far. The front ends felt really, really stable, and when you do get the bike eventually settled in a rut nicely, the front end tracks through just beautifully. Really, really do enjoy it. The whips/scrubs are very enjoyable as well now, because you have got that less traction on the back. It steps out easier on the face to jump, which then leads to like bigger scrubs, or the bike does feel more responsive in the air, which again is another weird thing, since like, it feels less so on the ground but more so in the air. I don't understand the correlation between the two there, but yeah, the bike feels very responsive in the air, even from a gyro perspective. Like, you can get the bike cranked over now, like cranked over, accelerate. Didn't even have to bring that back with my sticks. If you rewind that, I just brought that back on the gas, so the bike brings itself back in line really, really nicely in the air. But yeah, it's just something about on the ground. I just feel a detachment to the bike and just feel like I'm constantly having to battle and fight, even if I'm taking my time. Obviously, motorbikes, they're very, very heavy, they're very, very powerful, and you do kind of have to wrestle them around the track for the most part. But if I'm trying to be like silky smooth and consistent and just trying to be slow into ruts and then smooth out on the throttle, still feel like it's a bit of a, like back end's constantly going on me, and I don't feel like I was trying to push too hard, which again, I don't know if I am just having a funny 20 minutes or so on it, and maybe it is from a lack of experience, but it does feel slipperier / less responsive, less in control than the preview 3 ones did. But based on the notes, it's meant to be the opposite way around. So I don't know, maybe I've got it wrong. Maybe this is just one or two of the OEM testers felt something that I didn't feel. I have no idea. But I just, yeah, my plan was to practice on this for a fair bit, and then do a video based on it. But my just initial feeling on them was just a bit off compared to the enjoyment I had on the preview 3s. I really did feel like 3s were third time's the charm. These fourth ones, if the full OEM packs release on these, I think obviously a lot of the GP and MX tracks that are out now will be a lot less enjoyable than they are on the preview 3 bikes, and I'm intrigued to see what future tracks will become, because I think on the preview 3s, where it was more of a control thing, and I could go inside and slide the back end out and just be a lot more controlled on the flat tracky areas, it was, I would say it was still competitive to go insides over outsides if need be, whereas on these, it almost feels like if there is a big outside rut somewhere, oh, I'm going to crash. Oh, okay, never mind. You would be stupid not to take it. And it does scare me for like outdoors racing. Supercross might be a bit different, because I did mess around on the little arena cross track on Moto 101 a bit, and you can cut down in the 180 bolt turns really, really hard, like really, really hard, and get on the gas at a decent rate. But then like the flat 90-degree turns that you get on your Supercross tracks, or the flat 180s, they are certainly difficult, to the point where they're almost not too fun. And it almost feels like going way back to the Beta 17 era, if anyone was around for that, where you could be third gear, quarter of a throttle, and still sliding and still spinning the back end up. I'm not sure what changes would have to be made. I'm not sure if it's the act of, or the tyre possibly moving on the rim of the bike now that they're trying to replicate, that's causing any wonkiness or any detachment. I don't know if there's anything else that would affect the overall handling and feel of the bike, like I'm feeling, like the feedback that I'm getting through the bike itself. I don't know. All I can say is I prefer 3s over 4s. And as someone, I just go based on feel, really. I don't know. I really struggle to put into words sometimes how the bike reacts and what it's doing. But all I know is it feels slightly off this time. It does feel like there's a disconnect between myself and the bike in terms of responsiveness. Just on the ground, I will say. On the ground, in the air, absolutely fine. No issues at all within the air. Feels great. But yeah, on the ground, there's something going on there. Man, I can't put my finger quite on it. If anybody else has tried this, because I know they've been out for 2-3 days now at this point, then I would be interested to see the general community's thoughts, because this is something that I've not seen anybody else talk about yet. In general, I've not watched any opinions or read anything about Preview 4s. I'll be honest, I've been very out of the MX Bikes bubble/circle for a couple of weeks now at this point. But do let me know. I'm genuinely intrigued, because I don't know how well these would race, because I feel like I'm just fighting to get around the track at this point. I don't feel like I'm able to really push at all anywhere, which imagine from a racing perspective, if you're all tiptoeing around a track for 35 minutes, it might not be the most enjoyable experience in the world. Whereas on the Preview 3s, I do feel like you can attack and you can take different lines and cut here, there and everywhere, like cut down in a corner, stay wide and rally if you need to. And I just found it a much more fluid and an experience where you kind of know what the bike's going to do a bit more, whereas this feels a little bit more, you know, kind of hold on and see what happens, see what the bike does underneath you. So do let me know. Again, this isn't meant to just be like a video hating on these bikes at all. It's just purely how just I myself personally feel about them, and just the initial feeling of the bikes overall. And as I said, there are some positives in there. I do like the bikes in the air. I do like the front end, especially in once you get into some ruts. I don't think I've had any of the weird, you know, like front end tucks that we have on current OEM bikes at all, so that is also going in the right direction, which I'm glad to see. But yeah, I think it's just that rear end, which it must be an absolute pain in the bum to try and work out, especially with the just the base game that we have. I imagine they're very limited into what they can get the back to do and how they can get the back to feel. But that's just how I feel about it. So yeah, let me know if you did enjoy this, and by all means, please do drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new. It's very much appreciated. Have a lovely rest of the day, wherever you're up to, and I will catch you all in the next video. Peace.
Lynn's in the zone, never backing down. Riding MX bikes, he's the talk of the town. 2022 champ with a YouTube crown. His game is tight, no signs of slowing down. Late nights, bright lights, he's chasing that fame in the digital arena. Writing his name, she's a 10 out of 10. Supporting his lane, hairline might recede, but his passion's the same.